Hi, this is Ashish from developerhut.net and welcome to the second session of Into the Spring series, which is how to implement authentication using Spring Security. So in this example, we will be going to create a very simple application where user will be able to access any secure page using authentication. So for example, we will have a home page which is by default accessible, and whenever user wants to access the hello page, he has to perform certain kind of authentication, right? So let me add somebody. So I say John and some password, try to sign in, and once user enter the correct username and password, he will be able to access the hello page. And once he sign out and let's user tries to access the hello page, he will be routed back to the login page because user is not authenticated. So now let's go ahead and create this example.
So let's create a very simple Spring project from the Spring initializer. So project will be of type Maven, right? Language will be Java, and Spring Boot version for this session will be 3.3.4. Now, so let's create a group. I will say com dot developer hut dot spring dot auth. I will say auth. Okay. Artifact ID will be spring hyphen auth hyphen demo, right? I will we can also give a simple description. I will just skip this part. I will keep the package a bit short, which is com.developerhut.spring.auth. Language will be packaging will be of jar, and a Java 17 version will be used for this. Now let's add the dependency, which is more important in this case. So we are going to create the web application, so we will be using Spring Web Dependency, right? Then next will be, as we are creating a web application, we will be using some Thymeleaf for the UI purpose, right? So I will add Thymeleaf dependency, which will be help us to uh, render the HTML. Then let's add the Spring security also, right? Because we are going to use the authorization or authentication mechanism here, right? So I will be adding the Spring security. There is one more dependency that which we need to add here, but I will add that later. So if you go, let's see our pom.xml. If you see, so this is our group id com.developerhut.spring.auth. Then spring auth demo will be our artifact id and or a project name. Then we added the spring security, right, dependency, the Thymeleaf dependency, and the web dependency, uh, right? And we also have already got the Thymeleaf spring security dependency as well automatically, right? Now let's go and create our project. So now we have imported the Spring project, and you can see we have a Spring auth demo application.java file, which will be used as actual main file. Then we have resources, and we have a pom.xml, which we just saw. Now I will create one controller class. I will say class, I will say MVC, or I will simply say app controller, right? And I will put it in controller package. Okay, so let's finish, and let's create three pages. So we will be going to create three different mappings. So the first will be let's say home dot home file or home controller, right? And second mapping will be, let's say, uh, of course we require a login page, right? And third will be of uh, post home, there is some main page, let's say I will say hello, right? So if user tries to access the home, he can access the home plus login page without any authentication, or we can say without any username and password requirement. However, the hello page or hello mapping will be only accessible once he logged in successfully. So this is what we are trying to create. Now let's create a home first. So I will say public, I will say string, and I will say home. Okay, and I will just simply return home. Okay, so this will return the home string, which is in our case it will be a home.html. Let's add the mapping. So I will say get mapping, right, and I will add two values over here. So I will say value, and I will say if it's a slash, home should be accessible, and it should be home. Of course it should be accessible. Right now, let's create the home.html. Right, so I will go to the source pane resources and templates, and I will say new. I will say file, which is home.html. So we have created home.html. uh, I will just simply copy the template. So let me paste the template. So this is the default template which I have created. This will be a act as a home page. I will say welcome, let's say home for more clarity. Let's create the our next mapping. Now let's create the hello mapping. So I will say public, again a string, and I will say hello. Right, this page will be of course accessed once user logged in successfully. Right, so I will say return hello. Right, and let's create hello.html. We'll go to template, we'll say new, and I will say file, and I will say hello.html. Let me copy paste the template. So this will be a default template. We will say, which will say hello world, or I will say hello user, or I will simply say hello page. Right, and I will say hello user. This is the simple message that I wanted to display. Now let's test this application. I just wanted to make sure that whatever the mappings that which we have created, it is working fine or not. Right, uh, but before we run this, we just need to disable the Spring security. So I will simply go here and comment out the Spring security section from the POM file. Okay, so I will just simply commented this, and I will just also comment this. Right, because this may create a problem, but I don't want to get into that trouble before we start this. So we are ready. Let's try to run this application. I will say run as, and I will say Spring Boot application. So let's see, project is starting, and yeah, let's see. Yeah, so our Spring application is started on port 8080. So let's try to access this. So we'll go to the browser, and http:// localhost colon 8080 and slash. So when we say slash, it should display the page. Right, so we are not getting a page as of now. See, let's go to a project. I will just stop the project. I think we missed the @controller mapping here. Right, so I will say @controller. Right, so this is the important mapping which we require, and let's start the project again. I will say Spring Auth demo, run again, and our application is started. Let's go to the browser again and refresh the page. Yeah, so we are able to get the welcome home, which is the home.html content is displayed on the screen. Now let's try to access the hello. Right, so I will say slash hello. Right, and hello again, it is still not working. Let's see why. So we forgot the mapping, so I will simply copy paste the get mapping from here and put it over here. Right, so I will say hello. Right, uh, you can use either array as a parameter or single value also. Both will work in this case. Right, so I will just stop and start the project again. So our application is started. Let's go to the browser and refresh the page. So we are getting the hello user. Right, now what we want here is a very simple requirement. Whenever we want to access the home page, it should be without any authentication. However, the hello page should be with accessed with the authentication. only after authentication, successful authentication. So now let's try to achieve that. So now let's add the Spring security in this application. So the first thing which we need to do here is we need to uncomment our dependencies, which is Spring security and Thymeleaf Spring security. So these are the two dependencies which we have commented earlier, but now we want to uncomment it. So I will just save this. Now next is we need to add the security related configuration in the application. So let's create one class. So I will say new class, and I will say web security config. Okay, and let's finish. Okay, now the first thing, this class will be holding all the security related configurations of this entire application. So to make this class as the unique class, so first annotation which we need to add over here is the @configuration. So I will say @configuration. So this annotation enables this class to be invoked while startup, or your application startup, we can say. Next is this class should represent that this class is adding some security related configuration, right? So for that we have one more annotations, which is enable web security. So I will say enable web security. So this is done. Now next we need to create a method which will return some security related configurations. Okay, so for that we will be creating a bean. So I will say @bean annotation, and we'll create a method. I will say public, and a method should be returning the security filter chain. I will say filter chain, right? I will say security filter chain, and this method will take the parameter http security. Okay, so I will say http. So first things first, let's return the security filter chain. How we can do that? We will simply use http parameter and we'll say build. Okay, and we'll simply say return. So this method will return the security filter chain object. Next is we need to add the exception, the throws clause. So I will say here add throws declaration. Okay, so now our method is ready, right? So let's go ahead. Now the next is we need to add our security configuration, exact security configuration which we required, right? So now we said earlier that we are going to create a multiple controller or multiple APIs which we accessed earlier, right? We have a home and we have a hello, right? Now home should be accessible without any authentication. However, hello should be accessed with authentication only, right? So that configuration we are going to add now. So we will go and we will add here. So I will say http, I will say authorized request. Okay, and we will use our lambda expression. So it will take the object of request, which is the security related parameters, and we will add some values here. So I will say um, request dot request matchers. We will add our matchers. So basically matchers will be information of your APIs or your URLs, right? So I will add home, right? So these are the request matcher I have added. So what I want to do with it, whenever this URL called on this application, those should be by default accessible without any authentication request, right? Without any authentication basically. So I will say permit all. Okay, so whenever these two URLs called, those will be, application will basically skip the authentication part. Okay, and after that if any request come, right, then that has to be authenticated. So this is the simple configuration which we will be needed. Okay, so this will make our all the URLs as secure, or it requires authentication except these two, right? Now let's save this, and what I will do is I will just simply save it. Now let's see if it works or not. right? So I will just run the application. I will say run. So you can see now we enabled the security, so there is some security related you know logs are generated by default by the Spring application. Now let's go to the browser and let's try to access our home. So home is accessible, and now let's try to access hello. Okay, so hello is not accessible. It is showing access to localhost denied. You don't have authorization to view this page. Okay, so this URL is there, but application is not allowing you to access this, right? Now now let's go ahead and create some authentication. So I will just stop the application. Now the next thing which we need to do here is we want some login page, right? So what simply we can do is let's go to the controller and let's add one more mapping. So I will simply just copy this, sorry, I'll just copy and paste, and here instead of hello I will say login. Okay, I will again say login method name and return login page, right? Now let's create our login.html. So I will simply just copy this and I will go to the template and I will say new. I will say login.html. Okay, now I will copy the template which I have created earlier. So it will be a simple, a login form which will send a request with username and password, right? Now we are going to use the Thymeleaf over here, right? So whenever you want to use a Thymeleaf, there are specific rules which we need to follow, right? So that the application can understand how to render this HTML page. So I will create a separate video for the Thymeleaf understanding. If you're a beginner, you don't know the Thymeleaf, that is still okay. I will create a separate video and I will share the code also in this description section below. So the first thing which we need to do over here is we need to tell our HTML page that we are supporting Thymeleaf. So we will add our XMLNS annotation attributes, and we will add the Thymeleaf related dependencies. So let me copy those. So I will just paste this. I will say XMLNS, the W3R XHTML plus this, the Thymeleaf one, which is more important. We are telling here that we will be using the th tag, which is Thymeleaf. You can use any tag as you want. Okay, you can use Thymeleaf or th or anything, whatever you want here. Okay, now the next thing is we will use this tag. A very simple usage of this tag will do. So instead of action, we will tell it's a th action. Okay, so we will use the action attribute of a Thymeleaf, not the regular HTML action. Okay, and here the syntax is a little bit different, so I will just add at the rate and the brace, opening brace and closing brace. Okay, so this is very simple HTML page. Now let's add this login form to our security section. So let's go to the web security config and I will simply add here. I will just go here and yeah, so I will say form login, right? And we will simply add our details. So I will use the lambda expression. I will say form, right? And let me add form dot the login page. So what is my login page? That is I am going to define over here. So I will say login. Okay, so login is added, and whenever this mapping is called, that should be permitted, right? It should not ask for authentication. This doesn't make any sense. If you are asking authentication for a login page itself, it will never work, right? So this is the one thing which we need to add. Next is let me format this correctly, and next is once you access the login page, you also need to log out, right? So let's add those section, because Spring security also contain all the logout related functionalities. So we will simply add the logout method, and I will say logout, and I will say this should also be permitted, right? So logout dot permit all, right? Let's save this, and let's try to now run this application, right? We will see whether this login page is accessible or not. Logout, we will anyway check it later. So let me run the application. So our application is started. Let's go to the browser, and I will just simply duplicate this, and I will say yeah, login, right? So whenever you try to access any unauthenticated, it will automatically route you to the login page. So we have a login page with username and password, right? Now we have a login page, we have even a welcome page, but there is one problem. We don't have any user credential as of now, right? It is not there. So let's create a user. Now let's see how to create a user and where to store them. So Spring provides a in-memory database where you can store the related information. Any kind of information you can store in that in-memory database. So let's create a very simple bean. So I will go here and I will say at the rate bean, right? And let's say public. We need to return the user details service. So let me create user details service, right? And I will say user detail service, right? This does not take any parameter. However, we are returning the user detail service class or object. Okay, so let's create a user details. So I will say user details, and I will say user. Now let's create this object. So how to create this user details object here, right? So we have a user inbuilt class which is in the Spring, so which is from uh, org Spring Framework Security core user details. Okay, so let's use this user dot. So we will use a default password encoder. We don't want any separate password encoding for this, so I will use with default password encoder, right? Then create a user with some username, right? So I will say username, and I will say let's say John, right? Or I will say J capital John. Okay, then create the password for this. Password will be, let's say, password, right? Then next is we have to create the role. Role is something which is assigned to the user. We will see this role related things in a separate video. I will create a separate video on the complete authentication, where we will create a complete new project with lot of functionality we will be going to use. So we will see this section later, and lastly we will call a build method which will actually create the user details, right? Now let's see why this is compile time error. Yeah, this is not important. So the next is we need to return user detail service, right? So let's create one manager. So I will say return. I will use in memory database, right? So I will say in memory. Okay, I will say in memory user details manager. Okay, which will take the user as a input. You can create multiple users as well and return in memory user detail manager. Okay, so for now we will add only one user. You can add multiple users as well. Now let's try to run this application. So I will go and run. So our application is started. As of now we are creating our new user, so there won't be any additional security password by default created by Spring, right? So let's go to the browser, and we have our login page. Let's try to log in. I will say even before that, let's try to access the hello page, right? So we got the login page. after accessing hello, because we are not yet authenticated. So let's log in. I will say John, and I will say password, and let's try to click on sign in. Let's see. So yeah, great. So this is working, right? So we are able to access the hello page now, right? Now let's try to log in with some different user and see whether it's working or not. So I will say John again, and I will add some password, right, which is not the correct one. So let's try to sign in, and we are getting invalid password. So there will be different error messages or exception thrown inside the application, which we can utilize, and we will add them to the login page to show some helpful messages. For example, invalid password or invalid credentials, or you are logged out successfully, something like that, right? So even if you go here and you try to do the logout, right, I will say logout, so it should still work. Okay, but as of now we don't have a mapping, so this won't work. So this is how the Spring authentication thing works, right? So what we have created so far here is, if you see, we have created first few mappings, right? Home, hello, and login, right? Even if you try to access the home without logout, it will still work, right? So this is how the Spring authentication uh, will work here, right? And it's very simple. If you see, we have very simple application. We have only 3 pages, we have 3 mappings, and we have one configuration class where we just simply configure the application. You can also add some default URL if you want. This is kind of additional thing. So if you want to do this, you can simply add one more thing. Let's say uh, default success URL, right, which will be hello in our case, right? So we'll say hello. So whenever let's assume that if you have multiple pages in the application, so in that case, you want to log in to only a default page, then you can add it over here. This will still work. Okay, for now I will just simply save this, or I will comment this. This is kind of optional thing, right? I will say this is optional, right? So this is how Spring authentication will work. Okay.
So I hope you understand how to implement the authentication using Spring Security. So all the source code which I demonstrated in this video is available on my GitHub repository, and you can find the link of GitHub repository in the description section of this video. If you think this information is valuable, please do like and share this video. Thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next one.